amnesty. Let's talk more about that now as we're joined in studio by Dr. Ben Carson, who is the author of the book One Nation, What We Can All Do to Save America's Future. He's also co-founder and president of the Carson Scholars Fund, and he's chairman of the Save Our Healthcare Project. Dr. Ben Carson, so good to have you here on the anchor desk this morning.
It's good to be back with you.
Before we get to what the Republican reaction might be uniformly, what's your reaction to what the president had to say last night?
Well, my reaction is I don't think it takes into consideration the welfare of American citizens. Whenever you get on an airplane and they have the announcement section and they say, if there's an emergency, oxygen mask will drop down, put yours on first and then administer help to your neighbor. We have millions and millions of people in this country, in our inner cities, Appalachia, rural areas, who are suffering enormously economically. And why don't we spend some time figuring out what we can do for them? If we place nearly as much emphasis on them, I think we might be able to then reach a point where we can administer aid to other people. It really doesn't make a lot of sense. And to say that, well, only the people who've been here for 5 years or more are going to benefit from this, that's craziness. Anybody you pick up on the street is going to say, oh, yeah, I've been here for 5 years, I've been here 6 years, I've been here 10 years. What are you going to do? I mean, so basically you're extending amnesty to everybody. And then he says, well, you know, they're not going to be eligible for health care benefits and some of the other benefits. Give me a break. They're going to be eligible for all the benefits if they're here. And we're already approaching $18 trillion in national debt. We're just going to keep ballooning it. And there are those who have said the way to destroy a prosperous nation is through debt. Sometimes it makes you wonder.
Well, we take a look at what the president offers, and to hear your reaction to it, it sounds like it's flawed with fraud, because there's just no real way to offer a check. Some others have been reacting, Doctor. For example, Senator Ted Cruz reacted very strongly. He posted a response on Facebook, a video response, so let's take a look and listen.
Okay.
Tonight, just a few minutes ago, the President of the United States went on national television and announced that he is defying the Constitution. He is defying federal law, and he's defying the American people.
Simply stated, Dr. Carson, is this a constitutional crisis?
I think it probably is, but the real question is, will other senators and congressmen have the same kind of backbone as Ted Cruz? Will people stand up, or will they allow the president to steamroll them? I am very hopeful that they will stand up to him. And I hope they put in front of them a whole list of things that can be defunded, and then look specifically at the ones that are going to hurt him and those around him. Defund those things. I don't want things that are going to hurt the American people, but you remember during the sequester, that's exactly what he did. He looked at the list and he says, what will inflict the most pain on the American people so that they'll say, no, we can't have any decrease in funding. So we can do the same thing to him.
Now, Dr. Carson, sounds like you don't fear the notion of a shutdown, because a whole lot of Washington Republicans, they hear the word shutdown, they say they're going to be blamed. 30 seconds, your take on a shutdown.
Well, it's not an all or none phenomenon. You don't have to shut down the important parts of the government. You just defund the things that are important to the president.
Well said. Well, obviously, there is a lot to talk about with this decision and other matters. Dr. Ben Carson, we'd ask you to stay with us, and we'd like to get your thoughts on what the good doctor had to say. Why don't you tweet us at Newsmax TV, hashtag America's Forum. There's also newsmaxtv.com/comment. And don't forget Facebook. You can reach out to us, facebook.com/Newsmax. Our faces are coming back as we continue the conversation with Dr. Ben Carson right after this. Let's continue our discussion now with Dr. Ben Carson. Dr. Carson, when you hear Senator McConnell, and granted he is not the majority leader yet, but given the rules of the Senate, Aren't there actions that Senator McConnell and others there can take right now, not waiting until January?
Well, I suspect that they are starting to take those actions. I think they're starting to prepare the groundwork, because it's not something that you just turn on a spigot. You have to prepare the ground first, and they're doing that. So I'm actually very encouraged by what I hear Senator McConnell saying, and some of the other people. And I've been saying for a long time, you know, the American people are very disappointed. They feel that there's no one who represents them, because so often the Republicans come up to the brink and then they blink. And they go and they say, well, we can't really count on them. I've said for a long time, if they really have spine, and if they really stand up for American principles, the people will back them up. I truly believe that.
And yet, Senator McConnell will preside over a fractured Republican majority. There are a lot of Washington establishment figures. There are 4 senators in that Republican conference who were part of the Gang of 8 who voted for that amnesty bill a year ago. When push comes to shove, was the current president smart to move forward with the executive order, knowing that there are some significant differences of opinion within the Republican majority?
Well, you see, I very much disagree with those people who think that the current president is not smart. I think he's very smart. He's very clever. He's very scheming. And boy, if he could use that intellect on behalf of the American people rather than on behalf of his nefarious agenda, we would be doing quite well.
And you mentioned the nefarious agenda. Essentially, is he just trying to, instead of get out the vote, bring in the vote? Is this all designed to have new voters, despite the fact he claims they're not going to get citizenship? Yeah. Is the long-term goal to bring in a new class of voters dependent on government?
Well, of course it is, because if it was really about compassion, why wouldn't we be using all of this energy to help all of those young people in our inner cities, in Appalachia, in our rural areas? I mean, they've been there all along. Why aren't we spending all this time and effort on them? Oh, believe me, this is an agenda.
We should note that right now, House Speaker John Boehner is conducting a press conference. You see the video live from Capitol Hill. We will monitor the speaker's comments and bring them to you later this morning. Dr. Carson, Speaker Boehner, governing's tough, and he's gotten frustrated, and he had some uncomplimentary things to say about Tea Party conservatives, again pointing out a rift between the grassroots and the establishment. Your take on Speaker Boehner and what he may do?
Well, to Speaker Boehner, to members of the Tea Party, to members of any faction of the conservatives, we've got to stop fighting each other. It makes the secular progressives dance in the streets when they see that. And we've got to be able to look at the big picture, understand what our objectives are, and recognize that people will always have differences. I always say if 2 people agree about everything, one of them isn't necessary. So we just need to learn how to talk and work out things, but understand that unless we stick together, they will win.
Let's literally spend 1 minute on Ferguson. I know we could spend all morning on it. We're expecting some sort of announcement from the grand jury, threats of violence. What do you think is going to transpire in Ferguson?
Well, I hope and pray that the people of Ferguson will recognize that they're being manipulated. And for what various agendas, I'm sure there are several, but recognize that it's not doing you any good to get out there and to destroy property and to hurt other people. And really what it does is it justifies the militarization of the police across the nation. This is not what we want. We love our police. We don't want to get into this big confrontational thing, which sets us up for bad things in the future. I don't like the idea.
Very quickly, Reverend Al Sharpton, should he go back to Ferguson or stay away?
I think it would be very helpful if he would direct his attention to all of those young people in inner cities who are going to be killed today and tomorrow, and get at the root causes of those things.
Fair enough. Dr. Ben Carson, author of the book One Nation, What We Can All Do to Save America's Future. We understand that as they're taking a look at book sales this year, you may end up with the #1 nonfiction book. So good to have you here, Dr. Ben, on America's Forum. So, you heard what the good doctor had to say. We love your comments. Tweet them to me at NewsmaxTV, #America's Forum.